but we're all good.
Yes.
So let's get into it. First, for those who may not know you, I did do a little intro, but if anybody who does not know you, feel free to, tell everybody about yourself and who you are.
Yeah, so my name is Twila-Amoure. I live in Atlanta. I'm not from Atlanta, but I normally lie and say I am because I've been here for so long. I am an entertainment journalist, celebrity correspondent, and I am the editor for the Jasmine brand. Yes.
Yes. Now let's get into that. How did you let's start into with your journey when it comes to entertainment news and media and actually getting in with Jasmine Brand?
Yes. So, as far as my journey into journalism itself, I have always wanted to work in the world of media.
Mm-hmm.
I think I'm kind of one of those, I think it's kind of like luck, but also maybe like a double-edged sword when you kind of know what you want to do from jump.
Mm-hmm.
So I've never really wavered from writing and storytelling. I remember being in elementary school, I had a magazine that I would make the kids pay for. And when I got and then when I got in middle school, I did the morning news, same thing in high school, morning news, majored in broadcast journalism in college. That's what with a minor in cinema studies. And then post graduation, like most college kids, I really didn't know what I was doing. I graduated college in 2019, right before everything kind of shut down with the world. And that's when I found myself back in Atlanta. I came back to Atlanta and I saw the Jasmine brand was hiring. So initially when I started, I was a part-time contributor. I probably worked a total of 8 hours a week for them, if that, at that time.
Oh, wow.
So since then, 2020, 2019 to now, me being the editor and their celebrity correspondent, I'm just thankful that they have allowed me the opportunity to grow with them and learn. Especially now in the state of journalism, I don't know what's going on with journalism. So kind of having
it's something in the water.
It's something in the water, in the air, and in the food. I don't know what is going on. So yeah, I'm just very blessed to have found a publication, a media outlet that has allowed me to grow with them as a journalist and also as just an individual as well.
Okay. And now let's get into as far as your experience when it comes to, because you had a radio show in college.
Mm-hmm.
Now let's get into that. Then how did you go from, doing a radio show and then as far as journalism itself?
Yeah, so when I was in college, my college career, I started off in Rhode Island.
Okay.
And me and some of my friends, we had a just a local radio show. At that time, my vision for myself was more hard news. I thought I was going to be your local news anchor, working myself up the ranks in that. So the radio show, in all honesty, it was just me and my girls just gisting. After a full day of classes every Friday, you knew we were going to be on air. Our friends would call in. It was kind of like our podcast before podcast. Yeah, before it became what it is today. Yeah.
Okay. And then now, how's your experience been with the Jasmine brand?
I love it. Honestly, I love it. I really am lucky to genuinely love what I do.
Mm-hmm.
Again, I just feel like journalism's in a weird space. I think every time I get online, I'm seeing another publication close down, which is crazy to me. Especially someone who grew up, I remember thinking oh, I'm going to work for MTV News one day. And then MTV News shuts down. I'm like, maybe not. Let me go back to that vision board real quick. So
make some reevaluation.
Yeah, let me reevaluate this real quick. So I'm just, my experience with them so far, I don't have any complaints. I really do love it.
That's beautiful. Now, also, I want to get into as far as, when it comes to having a media outlet, some people feel like certain blogs or media outlets are messy. So now, how do you know when to what boundaries not to cross when you are, talking about a story or writing a story?
That's a really good question. I think that for me personally is the biggest difference between a journalist and a blogger, and no shade, no tea. I think that there are a lot of people that work in the blogging space that are legitimate journalists, but every journalist isn't a blogger, you know? So I just feel like it comes down to like, if you do go to school for journalism, you learn about ethics and morals and, you know, not running certain stories because it is tasteless.
Yeah.
And I also like, you know, I do work under Jasmine Brand herself, who is phenomenal and amazing. So her just being a Black woman, having her own media outlet, and that's like her baby. You know, I personally feel like with our space, it's a little bit different maybe than other blogs where there's no type of decorum. It's like if it's salacious or if it's trending, they're gonna throw it out like right away. You know, doesn't matter what the story is about. Versus with us, like I know there's been instances where maybe like a celebrity child is in the news, and we're like, we're not gonna touch that. You know, that kid isn't even famous.
Yeah.
Thoughts and prayers, but that's not gonna be, you know, covered over here.
Yeah. Because, you know, a lot of outlets, they don't care. And I've also seen where certain stories have been pulled. Like, for example, I've seen just recently, there was like a story about Bruno Mars being in like $5 million worth of debt with MGM Hotels. And then a story came out saying that he's not. He actually has like a long-term partnership. So it's just like, you know, where do they get their new, like, how do you validate your sources, and where do you get your like, you know?
Yeah. And I think like for me, you know, I can't speak for other publications, but for me, that's definitely like my role as an editor. I have to fact check like through and through and through. I need to know who was the first person that, you know, dropped this. When did it initially drop? And a lot of times, especially now with social media, sometimes things will resurface in the news where people will like immediately grab it and start running it. And then if the story lands on my desk, a quick Google search, I'm like, no, this came out like 2019. So we're not going to touch that. And then swinging back to the Bruno Mars situation, I think that the biggest difference there is like, as a journalist, you have to do those updates. You have to do those corrections. I know like if we run a story and something else comes out, as soon as we get a chance, there's an update to that. Like, hey, actually, no, that's not true. Or they spoke on this and has kind of debunked that.
And then also that gets into like my next question as far as, because I've seen Cardi B, she's sued certain outlets and things like that. So it's like, how do you prevent that from happening, especially if the story is true, or from them dropping a defamation suit on like such as Jasmine Brand?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think it honestly just comes down again to just like you fact checking, because there will be times where you will run a story that is true, but it may not paint that celebrity in the best light.
Yeah.
So of course you're going to be reached out by their publicist or, you know, their manager, like, hey, can you pull this? But there's a difference between defamation and your feelings being hurt.
Yeah.
If your feelings are hurt, I'm sorry. My apologies, my bad, sis. But I'm not going to pull a story just because your client is upset over the facts that we have published.
And what do you think is like the most rewarding thing about, you know, being in media, being a journalist? Sorry.
It's for me, honestly, it's the little things. Like if I'm interviewing someone and they hit me with like, oh, that's a good question, or I've never been asked that before. It makes, I don't know, it's just a little pat on my back. Like I did that research. I love when, like if I cover something that hasn't really been picked up by the masses yet, and I see it kind of create a narrative online. I think for me, that's the biggest reward, just being a part of the machine that is the trending conversations and, you know, the dialogue that happens on Twitter or, X, TikTok, on TikTok and things like that. I really love just knowing when something like a conversation is happening that I was someone who kind of attributed to that taking place.
Okay. Do you ever feel like you have to balance when it comes to like current event news and entertainment news, or?
Definitely. 1,000%. I think one can exist without the other. You know, current events and pop culture is kind of like what came first, the chicken or the egg. I feel like they interloop and they lap more often than not. So I think that we're now in a space where journalism, I think the beats of like the genres of the field are kind of starting to bleed over a little bit. And you really have to be able to wear multiple hats and have multiple interests, and keep up with bills and bylaws and legislation and things like that. Like, for example, the TikTok thing, how that's a political aspect, but it's also a part of pop culture.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you just have to, have a footing in both of those spaces.
Mm-hmm. What is there like your most memorable moment from like being a correspondent and writing stories?
Oh, hands down, I interviewed Lorianne Gibson from Making the Band a couple years ago. Yeah. And to date, that is still like something that I just hold to like the utmost regard from just growing up and watching her. And I interviewed her based upon her memoir that she written a while back. Just like the gems that she, told me, and just like how honest she was. And prior to reading her book, I didn't know her story. I think when it comes to like the space of media, it's easy to feel like someone's like an overnight success. You just see them on your TV, or you like see a headline about them. But when you really like get this chance to sit down with that person and be like, wow, like you really started from nothing. You're not a nepotism baby. You didn't have any connections. And you built an empire like by yourself, So I'll always, I think that might always be one of my favorite, if not my favorite interviews. Okay.
And how do you see, as far as like the landscape of media when it comes to AI? Do you feel like in some, the media girls were going to be replaced? Like, how do you feel?
I hope we not, girl.
But they just taking over.
They're taking over. I really hope we're not, but I feel like it's coming where there's going to be like an era of journalists, like how like last year we had the Hollywood strike. So like the actors and the writers, and how they were adamantly pushing against AI in their spaces. I feel like journalists are about to be on the street with picket signs, like give it a week or so. Because I like I said, like I'm seeing a lot of like these publications shut down, and then they're just running stories by like AI generated machines. And that's so weird to me. I think it takes away just the soul of just journalism. So I don't know what the world of like media is going to look like in a couple of years, to be honest with you.
Yeah, because you don't have like that laughing connection that like we don't have that when it comes to like artificial intelligence.
Yeah.
And how do you stay creative and inspired when it comes to your work?
I am just plugged into what other media people are doing. Literally from like you all like checking interviews that you guys put out and things like that. I love just like reading other people's stories. I love surrounding myself by other creatives. Issa Rae like has this saying where she says like people often think you have to network up, like, oh, I need to connect with this person and this person. You need to go across, like you have to go across. So that's for me is like what I'm doing, just like being inspired by the media girlies that I know personally, like Jasmine Flowers. I met her a few years, like last year, I think. Shay, who's a photographer here in Atlanta, the Birmingham area. Jada, who's one of my really good friends. Just making sure that like my neutrals inspire me on a daily basis.
That's good. Now let's also get into Intrusively Said.
Okay.
So now let's like because I know this has been a long time coming that you've that you've been coming out with this.
Yes.
So but you're coming out with it this summer.
Yes.
Okay. So just tell the people about it just a little bit. What can we expect? And yeah.
Okay, so Intrusively Said is my podcast. It actually started off as This Week on Black Twitter. I started it when I transferred from my school in Rhode Island. I transferred over to UAB, University of Alabama in Birmingham. And my mentor, Pat, shout out to Pat. I'll never be able to repay you for the things that you have done for me. But he pretty much was just like, you need your own. Like, yeah, you can work for these publications. You can work for these outlets. But I think he kind of like foreshadowed where we are in media right now. But he was like, that stuff is not a given. You know what I mean? If the lights shut off in that building today, you need to make sure that you're still relevant. You still have your own thing going. You still have a way to pay your bills and eat and people are still seeing you in the media in some aspect. So he actually was the one who low-key made me start the podcast. And it was This Week on Black Twitter, and it was just me. And again, my good friend Jada, she would be a guest, my good friend Tara, and we would just like recap trending topics off of Twitter. I had at that time, being in college, a lot of resources. We had like an audio lab. Again, my mentor was right there. My friends is like, down the street, girl, pull up, let's do an episode. But then it's like, once you graduate and you no longer have like those resources, that kind of played into the delay. And then also when Twitter was no longer Twitter, I was like, okay, girl, we need to go back to the drawing board because Twitter don't even exist. It's now called X, and I don't know.
Like,
I don't know what is that. Yeah, I don't know that girl. I don't know that girl. Yeah. So, and I also feel like as I'm just like growing and like going through my 20s, I am just battling like a lot of like intrusive thoughts as far as like imposter syndrome or things that, yeah, maybe shouldn't be funny, but I'm not gonna lie, I might cackle, you know, low key, ha ha ha. So I just wanted to create a cohesive space for people who are kind of like, for lack of a better like terminology, in like their insecure era, like season 1 or 2, where you're just trying to figure it out, you know, find your space, find where you belong, find your people. Yeah.
Yes, I love that concept. And, you know, also I love what separates it. It's like for regular people like us. Like, it's not one of, and I hope it's not going to be like one of those, you have the men podcast.
Oh, girl, no.
Like, please. Please raise the price of my eggs, but now, what is something that you hope listeners take away from this?
I really want listeners to, a few things. When they listen to Truthfully Said, I want them to kind of know that they have a place where they belong. I feel like it may have started with like COVID, where we were all kind of like shut down and isolated. But I think now we really don't have third places anymore. Like a lot of people, it's just work and home. We don't have that communal area where our regulars are frequent, like maybe our parents, they're like a bar that you're always at and things like that. That's not the norm for a lot of us. And I also, being like in Atlanta, I'm seeing like a lot more people say like how they feel alone. Like, oh, I don't really have any friends, or like all my friends are like long distance. And I know like that firsthand, like a lot of like my closest friends are in Alabama or in New York or somewhere else, you know? So I just, for me, when people listen to the podcast, I want them to kind of, laugh and like, hee, we're going to have a good time, but just also just have like life spoken into you. Like, it's not, the only person you're going against is yourself. You don't got to worry about other people. You don't got to worry about, you know, what the next person is doing. It's just you versus you. This is the community. We're going to laugh. We're going to talk about pop culture. We're going to talk about current events, and we're going to talk about it from a place of just like honesty and just being 100% candid with how we genuinely feel.
And I want to also go back to with the imposter syndrome, because you know that's something a lot of people feel like that's not a common thing. I mean, at my big age, I still deal with imposter syndrome a lot, and still going through it. But what are some things, or what's some tactics that you do to like overcome imposter syndrome?
For me, I am big on meditation. I really just like to, like, maybe like a couple times a week, just kind of like sit down, just like to ground myself, center my thoughts. I also love journaling. I try to journal daily, even though it don't happen like that, to be honest, but I try to journal daily. And then I also have just a journal where I just simply write like my gratifications. I think when we're in the motion of life, we don't realize how far we are progressing. Sometimes when it's your own motion, you don't see the motion. You don't feel like you're moving, versus I have learned you never know who's speaking about you positively in rooms that you aren't aware of yet. You know, a prime example, when you guys reached out to me, you know, even though I was aware of who you are for a while now, but I didn't know that y'all were aware, you know, didn't know went both ways, you know. So when you guys reached out, I was like, okay, yeah, definitely, you know. So I think you just have, and that's something that I also struggle with. I think that it's really hard for me to pat myself on the back and allow myself to feel those moments of like joy and congratulations for myself versus when my friend can literally wake up on time. I'm like, you go, girl. Let's go. Like let's go.
I wish I was that friend. I wish.
Yeah,
but I feel like you can't pat yourself on the back.
Say that again.
So why do you feel like you can't like pat yourself on the back?
I think I'm just like, I think as a creative, it's like I'm an artist and I'm sensitive about my, so I just feel like anytime I'm definitely working on getting out of it, but when I watch back interviews or when I read back stories, I am the first to admit I am my hardest critic. I'm like, oh, I should, even like a word, I'm like, oh, I should have worded it this way, or I should have blah, 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 Mm-hmm. So I'm just like actively, like literally actively every day, just reminding myself like, girl, breathe, like calm down. Like same with Lori and Gibson. I didn't have anybody ushering me into this. Like I'm not a Nepo baby. When I got into the world of journalism, I don't have any like pre-connects, every connect I have, I made myself. Every, friend in this, I made myself. Everything that I have done, I've kind of, just got out there and did that by my own. So I just have to like remind myself to, even though I do have bigger aspirations and bigger goals, I have to allow myself to appreciate how far I have come.
Yes. No, for real. And can you, because you're currently in Angela Rye's professional development program, correct?
Well, I was in it, yes.
Mm-hmm. Can you give us a little bit of insight on like how the program went, for those who are not aware of it, and also what did you like learn or what did you gain from that program?
Yeah, definitely. So for those of you who don't know, Angela Rye has a media professional development program. Would definitely recommend if you're interested. I think the age requirement, I think it starts like college era, but there's no cap on the age. So anybody can come in. For me, my biggest takeaway, again, I'm just like big on community. So some of the people that I met in that program, we still connect to this day. Like we still talk on TikTok, on Instagram and things like that. We still check in with each other. Also, I think that even though I do value networking, across, if you get somebody a book, you take it.
Yeah.
You better take it. Yeah. So just having the chance to like pick her brain and things like that, and also speak to people on her staff about their careers and how far they have come. That's something that I'll never, take lightly.
Okay. Did you, aside from like working with Angela Rye, was there anybody else like that was in the industry that you got to work with or pick their brains off of any certain topic?
During the fellowship? Yeah. During the fellowship, we actually had a meeting with Charlamagne the God, which that was really cool. I'm a big fan of his. Like, of course, like the Breakfast Club, but for me personally, I'm a book nerd, so I really love his books. Like I really do like Black Privilege and the books that followed after that. I like the message within those books. I think it's kind of like, again, same message with like the Issa Rae thing. Like you have to max out every resource around you. You know what I mean? Continuously work until you are the big fish in that small pond, then hop out and go to the next pond. So just having a chance to just hear him talk, even like briefly, it was really cool.
Yeah. And it's just also that you bring up his book, because I loved his book, Black Privilege. It's like if you like really read it and you get to like read his story, he like worked his ass off to get from where he was in South Carolina. He didn't have like a major, like a college degree, worked at stations, like he got fired from stations, and now he's one of the hosts of the most, like the #1 syndicated radio show. So it's just amazing. It just tells you the sky's the limit. Anybody can do it, So but that's so cool. And can you offer any advice for any media personalities or anybody who's looking to transition into media, or certain techniques that you use?
Yes, definitely. So as far as like anybody who's looking to not just be a journalist, but be more so like an entertainment journalist, I remember people would tell me this and I would hate when they would give me this piece of advice, but it's so true. Like circling back to what my mentor Pat told me, you have to make sure you have your own. And I used to hate that so much because again, in my mind, I want to be like a hard news anchor. I just want to clock in, be on camera, go home. You know what I mean? Like, I didn't really want to, I think at that time, I just figured like, it might be a quicker elevator up if I was under someone else. But I think now we're seeing like, sometimes being by yourself, or not by yourself, but having your own, the elevator go shoot up, like it's gonna go up. So my advice to anybody who wants to get in the world of like entertainment media specifically is just craft your own, but like genuinely put time and effort into what you're doing. Like genuinely, I feel that entertainment journalism is kind of glorified. I think a lot of people look at it as just like the red carpets and interviewing celebrities. But there is a lot that goes on behind the scenes. Sometimes it can be a little stressful. So I just would, urge people to, even in you building your own, to hone your skill, hone your craft. And then also you have to trust the process. You have to trust the journey, and just appreciate where you are. And it's such a cliche, but it's true. You got to appreciate where you are.
Yeah. Speaking of red carpets, now, what is some advice for when you're on red carpets and dealing with other publications who are trying to get an interview? Because I've spoken about this before when we went out to LA, or we've been on red carpets before. Like, you have everybody who's trying to, get that interview, and it's like you kind of gotta make your own way. Mm-hmm. So how do you deal with that?
I think it's like, it's red carpets, but it's also like press junkets too. I think when you're interviewing celebrities, if you're not the first, like either like in line on the carpet or the first like in line as they're doing like press interviews and things like that, unfortunately, sometimes by the time they get to you, they've already heard every question. So it's not, sometimes the energy can be a little bit short. I think that's why, again, you just have to like put time and effort into your craft. Like, if you're interviewing maybe like an actor, like try to avoid generic questions of like, so how'd you get this role? Because I promise you, like, they've already been asked that 5 times over. You know what I mean? Like, just genuinely, I always say, like, sometimes you have to like you are a viewer yourself. You're a consumer of media. Would you care about how they got that role? You know what I mean? Like, you have to like put more work into the answers. And I think as you do that, bringing it back to the red carpet, sometimes celebrities look out like media outlets. Sometimes they look out like journalists because they know, like, every time I see you is a good time. Mm-hmm. Every time we connect, you come with them good questions, or you just make me laugh and I love your energy, So I think it just goes back to just trusting what is for you is what's for you. You don't gotta, piggyback off of anybody's anything. You being you is what sets you apart from anybody else in this field.
Mm-hmm. And do you have like a certain technique when you are coming up with certain questions for certain celebrities, or even if it's somebody that you've never seen before, you don't know anything, how do you go for that?
I think like initially, like when I'm just spitballing questions, I just start like I'll type, but write down everything that I want to ask this person, including like the generic questions, right? Like I'll start down with that. And then from there, I just kind of like brainstorm and build off of that. Even when you ask somebody questions, you want to, like, the purpose of that is just like for that conversation. But my goal, like I said, like the bigger picture is to spark a conversation that transcends beyond that moment, right? Asking them something that once it hits the internet, okay, that's going to trend, like that's going to start a conversation. I love starting dialogue. Like, that is my thing. I love starting like just a bigger conversation about what the question was. So for me, when I'm in my space and like I'm writing down questions to ask celebrities, I just want to ask you things that will make other people weigh in on it. Like, oh, well, I never thought about that. Or okay, I didn't know that about them.
Okay. And do you ever have like any awkward like moments or anything when you are like, say like if you ask a question and someone is dry and they're just like, okay. Yeah. Like, how do you deal with that? They just answer the question just so prompt, and it's like, oh, okay.
Yeah, it's gonna happen. It's gonna happen. I remember, I think it was like 2 years ago. I did an interview with somebody, and when I got done, I sent it over to like the person who oversees me, and they were like, "Girl, this footage is like 10 minutes. What y'all talk about?" And I'm like, they didn't want for me, it definitely happens, but I feel like you sometimes you have, I think it's two things. One, I don't take anything personal. Everybody is like the star in their own life. Like before you got on this live, I'm sure you had, other things going on, and then you hop on here. Same with me. So these celebrities, they have their own stuff going on. So I think for me, I'm not going to ever take a bad interview, or maybe, I'm not going to take it personal. And then also you can't let it shake you. Like that's like the biggest thing. Like no matter how low their energy is, no matter how straightforward their energy may be, or their answers may be, you got to make sure like your energy is like still carrying it. And then also lastly, in that, I always try to avoid asking like yes or no questions, because how was your day? Or, did you like that movie? Yeah. So instead of that, like a better question would be, can you elaborate on the difficulties of this role? Compared to, you normally do comedy, this is a little bit more serious. How do you prepare for this role? Something like that to kind of like bring it out of them, versus like, was it hard? Yeah.
Yeah, it was so hard.
Yeah. It was a struggle. Okay.
So we do have a question. Someone wants to know, how can they get into being a writer with the Jasmine brand?
Yes. So the Jasmine brand, every like couple of months, there's normally a post that would go up on our Instagram. So I would just go to the Jasmine brand on IG, turn on that little notification bell, because it's coming person, girl, they, them. And then once you see that, like I would just, send over your resume, send over like some writing prompts and things like that. And then, the hiring process with the Jasmine brand, it can vary, but once you're brought on, it tends to move like very quickly. But I would just stay posted for that post, because like every 4 or 3 months, it's normally coming up.
Okay. And how do you foresee media as a whole in like the next couple of years, in the next, like, let's say 10 years?
10 years. I really feel like, again, like, and I feel like media is about to go through, I don't know, maybe like its own growth, hopefully. I really hope that, we as in like the field of media and journalism itself come out stronger and better throughout this craziness of like the massive layoffs and the publications closing down. I think that writing, journalism, mass media, it's such an important space when it comes to not just like entertainment news, but like current events also, and just like making sure that people have a landing ground to stay plugged in when it comes to things that they need to know about. So in a couple of years, like I'm just praying that we are in a better place as a whole than it's looking like right now.
Yeah. And I definitely want to see a lot of the messy ones. Well, first of all, not to bash anything, I don't understand how Media Takeout is still around. Media Takeout has been around since forever, and how that publication is not shut down, because the stories that they write is just, I don't know.
Yeah.
And okay, lastly, before I let you go, what is some words of encouragement that you can give to anyone that is looking to either work with Jasmine brand, get into media, and things that maybe start their own podcast?
Yeah, words of encouragement for someone just looking to just get into media in general would just be to do it. I think that we often mistake, like, I think perfectionism and procrastination, one and the same. It's just different masks, right? I think people will often wait for the right moment to start something, whether it be your own blog, whether it be your own podcast, or even just to apply to something, right? Oh, before I apply, I want to teach myself this, or before I apply, I want to get a little bit more experience. But waiting, nothing can be critiqued, nothing can be built upon, improved, if you're just always waiting, right? And that's the same thing with procrastination. Like, oh, I'll do it tomorrow, I'll put it off tomorrow. It's just one and the same. Like, it's one and the same. You can't be a creator if you're not creating. Like, and I think it's like Ira Glass, he has like this quote, and I'm summarizing it, but essentially it's like your goal, like, if you have a vision of where you see yourself as a creator, right? Whether that be as a blogger, as a journalist, a podcaster, a TikToker, a YouTuber, whatever the case may be, right? If you have this vision, you have taste. You have a vision for a reason. You were meant to do this. The goal now is to close the gap from here where you want to be and where you actually are, you know? And the only way to close that gap is to put out an ample body of work. In the beginning, you are going to suck. Like, that's just the truth. When I look back on my very first celebrity interview I did, it was Sukiyana, November 2020. And I'm not gonna like down myself. It wasn't bad, but yeah, it was my first interview. I was a baby correspondent, you know? So was the only way for me to get to the point of my personal goal of like my woman that I look up to, right? Like your Nina Parkers and your Jasmine Brands and your Zuri Halls, just to keep putting out that ample body of work. That's the only way that you're going to be where you desire to be. So to anybody out there who is like, yeah, I want to make a pivot. I think I want to work in like media. I think I want to be a journalist, whatever your beat of journalism may be, you just got to do it. Like, you just have to do it. Don't worry about the people that you know in your real life. If you need to unfollow everybody that you know because you're afraid of being embarrassed, just unfollow everybody or start a new page and don't tell anybody that you know personally about it. The way you're not allowing what they may perceive you to be to hold you back from where you could actually be. Time is going to pass regardless. Like, I don't like people say like, oh, I want to do X, Y, and Z, but I'm this year's old. I want to do X, Y, and Z, but I don't have the experience. 2 years is going to go by regardless, baby. 5 years is going to go by regardless. And in that time, you can be perfecting your craft, or 2 years later, you can still be in like the same spot, dreaming about something you want to do.
That was a word. that was a word. But no, a lot of people, they feel like, oh, I'm too old to be doing this. I'm too old. And you really don't know what within that time of you complaining about your age or whatever, you could be here.
You could be here. You know? You could be here. And I feel like that's something that I have learned, like being in this industry. Age like does not, I've met so many people doing this from like teenagers to literally like women like in their 40s, 50s who are just out there putting in that work. It does not matter because again, like that time is going to go by regardless. And for me, my goal when it comes to this, like I just want to, I know I've come far in my career, but like, again, like where I envision myself, I know I have some ways to go. And when it's all said and done, when people think about like the people that really added to this, like really like created something that is worthwhile, I want to be in that conversation. Like I want someone one day when they name off, you know, the Black woman or just the woman in general that they look up to, I want to be named off. Like I want somebody to say like, oh, I'm trying to be the next Twila-Amoure, you know? So it's just like putting in that work and just showing up for yourself and also not being afraid of constructive criticism. Like, there's a difference between just like, you know, naysayers in your comment section, but like people who like give constructive criticism, and you cannot shy away from that.
I'm glad you spoke on that because, you know, like you said, like you are artists and you are sensitive about your stuff.
Yes.
So there's a way to also take constructive criticism and also benefit you in the end.
The end, yeah. And that's why, like, kind of like, you know, I don't want to shade nobody's nothing. Like, I'm not trying to shade nobody's blog, publication, or anything, but that's why also, like, why I am thankful to be, you know, with the publication that I'm with. Because I do have people that I know, like, provide me good constructive criticism and also just care about the stories that we are pushing out. You know, I think that if the masses are consistently saying something, sometimes you gotta take that feedback and like apply it to what you're doing. You know what I mean? So, and no shade to nobody. Love everybody. No shade.
Well, Twila, I thank you so much for the time that you've taken to drop all the gems that you have and also just give us your story and tell us what you have going on. Again, you do have your podcast that is released. Do you have a release date for the summer? I know it's going to be the summer, but...
It's going to be the summer. I want to say ideally like that first week of summer.
Okay.
Yeah, but like I already have like my intro sound and my beats and things like that. my producer. So yeah, shout out to you, Keon, who's making like my sounds and everything like that. I have like my first 2 weeks of guests lined up.
Okay.
So yeah, so I am just excited about that. Again, it's Intrusively Said, the podcast, and like the Instagram is already up. It's linked in my Instagram bio, which is Twila-Amoure. You can also follow me on TikTok. I'm like very active over there. Almost at like 20,000 followers. So again, that's Twila-Amoure. Twitter, which I call X now. I love Twitter, but I'll be over there sometimes.
That's the same. Like I go when I'm like watching something and I'm like, ooh, I want to see like
yes,
yes. Like I want to see like talking about
yes.
But like on it every day, I can't.
And I was a Twitter girl. Like that was my space. But now I don't know her. I don't know that girl.
She's like the unwanted child now.
Yeah.
Now also, I want to know, are you gonna, because you do YouTube, or are you gonna start back with the YouTube videos?
Yeah. So I am starting. Oh, that's a good question, girl. I am starting back.
Watching them, I did appreciate them.
I am starting back with YouTube. That will be coming probably within like 3 weeks. I do have content lined up for that. Okay. With my YouTube, I'm going to be vlogging, but also talking about pop culture events as well. I mean, of course. So yes. And that is just my name, Twila. Everything about Twila-Amoure. Yeah, Twila-Amoure.
Name, it's you.
Yes.
Well, Twila, I thank you so much. Again, I appreciate you for coming on, dropping the gems that you drop. Everybody, please, if you are not following Twila, please follow her, Twila-Amoure, on Instagram, on X, on YouTube, TikTok. Hopefully they don't shut down TikTok.
Girl.
Hopefully. But I thank you so much. And please look for Intrusively Said podcast that is coming out this summer.
Yes.
So thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you. Thank you guys.